Hey, welcome to the AFL Round 11 2024 Betting Trend Report. My name is Reese, and in this video, every week I go through all 9 upcoming games for the round, go through the matchup, who's favorite, what the total is, and how that compares to the historical odds for this matchup in their previous times, going back through their last 5. Who's been winning, who's been covering the spread, has the total been going over or under, and what has all those numbers been, and any other betting trends specific to that matchup. Plus, going through my early thoughts for every one of these games of what I'm potentially going to be betting on come the weekend. Before we get into this weekend's games, though, quickly review round number 10. Started on Thursday with Gold Coast Suns running out big winners. 264 points scored in this game. Overall, on the round, 5 of the 9 games went under the total points line, though. So that means that's 3 weeks in a row now where the majority of games have gone under. So what we're going to see is total points lines slowly coming down a little bit as more games then start to go over the totals. And what I want to show you right now is how accurate the betting companies and their odds and totals have been so far this year. So far in 2024, here we're looking at against the spread betting. There's been 90 games, 45 home teams have covered 45, away teams have covered 45, favorites have covered 44, underdogs have covered 46. So this is where, you can't just always back favorites or always back underdogs over the long term. You're barely going to break even and you're going to lose money. But there can be different situations that are worthwhile betting. So a few of them so far this year. Favorites minus 30.5 have covered 13 of the 19 games, and underdogs 0.5, like plus 0.5 to plus 15 have covered 26 of 44 games. So they're the best situation so far. And obviously, with this table, you can dig deeper into the specific situations where teams performed really well. So, just quickly at a glance, we can see Gold Coast as a home favorite have covered 4 of 5, as an away underdog haven't covered any of their 3 games. So this is the kind of things that we want to look for throughout the season. West Coast as a home underdog cover 5 of 6, as an away underdog haven't covered any of the 4 games in that situation. And then on a totals perspective, because we did just mention 3 of the last 4 rounds have gone under. You'll notice now more games have gone under than have gone over the total points line. Day games are basically the same. Night games slightly lean towards the under so far this season. Also, last round, here we go. Home teams won 7 of the 9 games. There are only 2 away sides who were able to win their matches, and they were the Western Bulldogs and Fremantle, and Hawthorn obviously falling very, very short. Away teams did cover 5 of the 9 games, though, so even though they weren't winning, they were able to cover the spread in the majority of games. Underdogs covered 7 of 9 games, so it was a bad weekend to be backing favorites. The only 2 favorites who covered were the Sydney Swans against Carlton, winning by 52 points, and the Brisbane Lions beating Richmond by 119 points. Also, 4 underdogs won their games outright. Firstly, the Gold Coast Suns, the odds were fairly close in this game, but Gold Coast were the underdog and did win. Western Bulldogs beating GWS, Fremantle beating St Kilda, and the biggest underdog of the round, the West Coast Eagles, are beating the Melbourne Demons. They were the biggest underdog that won, I should say. They're paying over $6 for the win. Now, on to this weekend, starting with the Western Bulldogs versus Sydney Swans on Thursday night. This is a pretty good game. Since they lost a couple weeks ago against Hawthorn, the Western Bulldogs bounced back last week with a big win over the Giants. Giants kind of fallen off a little bit, so it's difficult to make too much of that. However, they did win it away from home, so there is more merit to that win. But Sydney have pretty much been unstoppable so far this year. And we're only getting a minus 10.5 line, which is fairly low. I expected this to be a touch higher, closer to the 15 to 18 point mark. Sydney, last time they met, were 6.5 point favorites at home. Last time they met in Melbourne in 2022, round 3, the Bulldogs were small favorites. Sydney have won 3 of the past 4. However, Western Bulldogs have covered 5 of the past 7 versus the Swans, and the home team has performed well, covering 6 of the past 9. But I do think the Swans can cover this minus 10.5. Kind of like the 2 options how I'd play this is Sydney minus 10.5 or the Swans 1 to 39. I do think they get the win, and I think they win by around that 20 to 25 point mark. 10 of the past 12 also have gone under. So that is another potential way you can play this game with the total at 168.5. However, you have the Swans, who are the number one attacking side, and the Western Bulldogs, who are the number three attacking side, which makes it a little bit tricky to play an unders in that kind of game. However, both teams, are fairly strong defensively. Swans the number one defensive side, the Bulldogs the number 7 defensive side. So, that slightly overcomes it, and you are getting a higher total than their past 2 meetings, but 6 points lower when they last met at Marvel. But I'm also like the Swans minus 10.5. Fremantle versus Collingwood. I think Fremantle can jag a win here against the Pies, who looked a little bit vulnerable. They were lucky to get away with the win last week against the Crows. Now traveling over to Perth, not really an ideal situation. Collingwood have won the past 3 against Fremantle. The last time they met at Optus was round 10, 2022. Freo have definitely improved since then and have a really good lineup. And I wouldn't be surprised if they were to win this game. I'd be looking at Fremantle on the head-to-head or on the money line for this matchup, as I think they could easily be favorites for this game. There's really not that much between these two sides, and Fremantle are by far the better defensive team. 5 of the past 7 head-to-head have gone under as well. At 153.5, it's a very low total. Last time I met in Perth, it was 135.5, so very, very low to staying out of the total in that game. North Melbourne versus Port Adelaide. Port minus 41.5, total 172.5. It's kind of like 2 ways you can play this game. You can either take Port minus 41.5 or take Port's team total to go over. Port Adelaide were very, very lucky to get past Hawthorn last week at home. They kind of bounced back to a really big performance. They've scored 115 plus in their past 3 against North Melbourne. They've also covered the past 4 against the Kangaroos and won 9 of the past 10. The only game they lost was 2019 when they were 5.5 point favorites and North were big winners. Just realized I had 2 errors written up here. The past 5 head-to-head have gone over. The away team has covered 8 of the past 10. How I'm likely to play this game is Port minus 41.5. I think they're strong enough defensively. Even though they're conceding 80 points a game, I think they're going to be strong enough to run out big winners here. But if we got a total for Port Adelaide under 105, then I'd also be playing that to go over. Carlton versus the Gold Coast. This is a very, very interesting game. Gold Coast have really hit form. Now the question is, can they do it away from the northern half of Australia? Their win last week against Geelong was very, very good, but it's well known that Geelong were missing a number of key players, so you can't read into that performance too much. Carlton have won the past 2, but Gold Coast have covered 3 of the past 4, and the home team has covered the past 3 in this matchup. I think the line is about right, minus 16.5. I do think Carlton should win the game. So my way I'm looking at betting this game is Carlton 1-39 as a margin bet, as I think they get over the line, but I think Gold Coast are definitely good enough to keep it close. The other potential way is either side 1-24. Carlton have had this little bit of a habit recently of starting games really well and then completely dropping off. But we know Gold Coast will put in full 4 quarters. If you look through their numbers so far for the season, their numbers are very consistent. Their first quarter is their worst, and that's Carlton's best. So, first quarter bet potentially on Carlton and a full game bet, keeping the game slightly closer is potentially how I'd like to play this. But yeah, Carlton 1-39 or first quarter play. Geelong versus GWS. This is a really, really interesting game. Don't want to bet into it until teams are out on Thursday night. So no real lean either way. Geelong at home deserving to be favorites. And I think at minus 9.5, I think it's definitely at the top end. Like, it could easily be a couple of points lower, more so like the minus 5.5 mark. But backing GWS with confidence off their past couple of weeks makes things a little bit tricky. If Geelong are still down on quite a few key players, then it's a great opportunity for GWS. But whether to back them or not is the question. And Geelong will be keen to bounce back at home after their latest performance at home against Port Adelaide, where they really started that game slowly. GWS have won and covered 4 of the past 6. And 9 of the past 13 head-to-head have gone under the total points lines at 181.5. That's a pretty high number. I would potentially look at an under. However, I do have that total a couple of points higher than what the current line is, based on the numbers. So whether I want to take that is probably a no. But main point for this game is wait for lineups to decide which way to go. Richmond versus Essendon. Essendon big favorites here. This is kind of shows how quickly teams can drop off. Richmond have won 13 of the past 14 versus Essendon, and the only game they lost was round 10 last season, where Essendon won by 1 point. And we've gone all the way from round 10 last season, Richmond 10.5 point favorites, $1.54, to now 44.5 point underdogs and $8.50 to win. So a 54 point swing in virtually a year between these two sides. Essendon should win and win fairly comfortably. Teams will be just racking up points against the Tigers, and Richmond can't score. It wouldn't surprise me if Essendon were to cover this 44.5. Don't have that much confidence in them doing it, but I think they should be able to. Probably the best way to play this game is looking into this disposals. Richmond are the side that concede the most disposals to opposition players. We know there's a number of players in this Essendon team who love to rack up the touches. On to Sunday now, the first game, Hawthorn at home to the Brisbane Lions. Hawthorn coming off the devastating loss last week. The key here is how they come through that performance. Interestingly, they have a very, very good record against the Brisbane Lions. They've won the past 4 outright, 3 of those as an underdog of $3.35 or greater. And they have also won 15 of the past 20 versus the Lions. They pretty much only ever meet once per season, and they also never really play up in Queensland, which kind of contributes to Hawthorn having that really good record. But obviously for that 10 years where Hawthorn were a top 4 side and the Lions were a bottom 4 side, those number of games through that period. Anyway, though, they have still won the past 3 as big underdogs and have also won the past 4. Would have preferred this game to be played in Tasmania as opposed to at Marvel Stadium. But I think the question you have to ask yourself for this game is how Hawthorn will come through that game. They're still a young side. How that affects them mentally, the way they lost that game, is the concern, but their good record against the Lions does keep them in. Brisbane coming off a much needed win and a big percentage booster last week against the Tigers at home. That likely has given them a big confidence boost coming into this game and, into the mid part of the season. I think the odds are about right, with Brisbane minus 16.5. It's probably a touch too high. Probably more so down to the 12.5, 13.5. I think it could move slightly lower to be a fair price. 3 of the past 4 head-to-head have gone over. Personally, just staying out of overs on Hawthorn games. Overall, this is an important game. Brisbane need to win. But probably from a betting perspective, I'll be staying out of. But Brisbane do need to win it in terms of their finals and especially top 4 chances of the game. They definitely can't afford to drop. Melbourne versus St Kilda. Melbourne 18.5 point favorites, $1.32 on the money line. They've won the past 4 against St Kilda and have covered all 4 of those. The total's at 153.5, and the past 4 have gone under. But you'll notice this total has continued to drop. 176 in 2021, 161 in 2022, and 156 last season, now down to 153.5. Have to lean towards the under both defensive sides. But I do like the Saints to cover a plus 18.5 spread in this game. I think they can definitely keep it close-ish. I also be considering either side to win by 1 to 24. I think, this is a 10-point game either way. Melbourne likely need a really bounce-back performance after what they produced last week against West Coast, but they are coming back from Perth, so not really an ideal situation, where St Kilda played in Melbourne last week, and they don't really have a bad record at the MCG. So it's not that bad of a disadvantage, this game being played there instead of at Marvel Stadium. But yeah, lean towards the Saints at the plus 18.5. Definitely do like the either side 1 to 24 gives you a slightly more leeway on both sides. And then final game of the round, Adelaide versus West Coast. The Crows 27.5 point favorites. They have won the past 4 against the Eagles and covered the past 3. As I spoke about at the beginning of this video, West Coast have been very good at home and really bad away from home. Don't want to back them at the plus 27.5, but I also don't want to back Adelaide minus 27.5 in this situation. I'm definitely interested in the over here. Over 162.5. 8 of the past 10 between these two sides have gone over. total at 178.5 last time they met, and same number when they last met in Adelaide. So we're getting a 16-point lower number. Adelaide have been a lot better defensively this year than they were last year, but the numbers have dropped off the past few weeks. And I don't think like these numbers have fully adjusted for it yet. Both sides have shown they're capable of scoring points, especially the Eagles over recent weeks. They just haven't been able to do it on the road, but definitely interested in the over in the last game. So I'll quickly recap all the games. I like the Swans minus 10.5 in the opening game. Fremantle as an underdog outright. Port minus 41.5. The Carlton Gold Coast game leaning towards Carlton 1-39. Staying out of the Cats Giants until lineups are out. Essendon, Richmond game. This will be a player prop game, most likely for me. Hawthorn versus the Lions, probably a stay out game. Melbourne versus St Kilda, like the Saints plus 18.5, and like the over 162.5 in the Adelaide West Coast game. The way I analyze games and have bet for the past 12 to 13 years now, full time, has been using statistics to help my decision making. I don't make decisions purely based on, teams I like, teams I don't like, or just because of one good performance or bad performance. It's all based on statistics. So I use the bet finders and tools like this to go through and analyze games, teams' performances, see where there's advantages and disadvantages and how they match up against each other, and make decisions based on that. Because at the end of the day, if you're trying to make decisions, you just bring up the odds on Sportsbet, for example, and you're like, oh, I think, that's a little too high, or this team should be favored and they're not. And you don't really have the numbers to back up your decision making. It's not giving you the best platform to be able to win long term. Like, yeah, you're going to win bets here and there doing that, but to win enough bets to be profitable every single year, that's going to be very, very difficult for you to do. And, I've been using these bet finders for the AFL and a lot of other sports for over 10 years. And it's been the main thing that's helped me. So a few weeks ago, I made these available to everyone. I call them the bet finders. So you got the matchups, you got all the player trends, disposal trends, everything you need to make decisions on a game from a side, total, and player prop perspective. So if you haven't checked out the bet finders and started using them yet, I'll put the link in the description so you can get all the detail, not just for the AFL and the NRL, but all the American sports as well. This is how I've been able to do this for so many years and always stay profitable year after year. I started this year posting these videos to YouTube to help you guys level up your game, and like this is the next step to help you really start capitalizing. And as part of the bet finders, you also get all the training on how to use them and how to maximize and research games to maximize your profits, and also the strategies when it comes to betting to be a profitable bettor and make the right decisions with your betting bankroll and your staking, and most importantly, the mindset that you're approaching it with. So definitely check that out, and make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because I'll be posting videos all season long, going through match previews, what I'm betting, who I think is going to win games, and just other general betting advice to help you guys make more money.